is it really enough? Giving my heart and my soul, but still don't feel like enough. Feeling inadequate, still getting after it. Trust me, the feeling is tough. Feeling is rough. Hold on a second, I'm thinking too much. Really wanna flow like water, but I don't drink it enough.
Yeah, messieurs! Welcome back to the Muff Spearfishing channel. In this video, I'll be covering a bunch of dive trips that happened over the course of about a week because I didn't get enough footage on each individual day for them to be their own videos. For the first couple days, I was going out on Gem, which is a boat based out of cul-de-sac. A bunch of my good dive partners from Cicero go on that boat all the time, which is why I was out there with them. While I was on the surface before making this drop, I saw a big school of Caesar grunts, which are the smaller fish with all the black tails. I saw them swimming around in this little channel in the reef, so I positioned myself above it so I would have an angle at them where they couldn't really see me. When you position yourself correctly and stay relaxed on the bottom, the fish will remain calm and they'll swim around as they normally would. There were some nice black maggots and Schoolmasters mixed in with the grunts, and with Schoolmasters being a snapper, it was my obvious target. I was about to take a shot on one, but it didn't give me the angle I wanted, so I just let it swim. Since I had a lot more breath hold, I just stayed on the bottom and waited for one to give me the shot I was looking for. After placing a nice shot in my fish of choice, I went back to the surface. I was kinda hoping for a stone shot there, but I just aimed a little bit too low for that. However, I can't really complain because it was a nice fish to add on to my carrier. That day was going super slow for me, and other than that one Schoolmaster, I only had a handful of pot fish on my carrier. It wasn't the worst day ever, but it was going too slow for us to justify staying out longer. We were about to pack up and leave, but then we ended up seeing a commercial conch boat coming back from a trip, so we decided to make a stop by it and make a couple drops. When these boats are coming back to the harbor, they'll stop somewhere to clean the conch and throw the guts in the water. This creates a chum slick that will bring big fish in from all around. While I was making the drop here, I realized that the current was ripping, so I faced into it and let it go over me and push me backwards. Once I was getting closer to the bottom, I just looked around for a bit, and when I looked behind me, I saw this big mutton snapper hanging out over the sand. As soon as I saw it, my first instinct was to lie down flat on the bottom to try and attract it. I quickly realized that wasn't going to work, so I used the current to push me towards it. Seeing how the fish was running, I thought it was going to get away, and I rushed a long shot. My shot placement was absolutely horrible, and with the size of the fish, I was really worried that the spear was going to come out. I just had to find the right balance between applying pressure and not ripping the spear out. Once I was getting a little closer to the surface, I was more comfortable with my shot placement, and I let the boat know that I had a fish.
I take one!
You could see that the fish was already getting tired here, so I pulled it up and tried to get my hands on it as quick as possible. It's always a great feeling to finally get your hands on a fish, and especially when it's a fish that you thought was going to come off. I brained and bled the fish to preserve the meat quality, and I was feeling good about having that fish landed. As the boat was passing to check me, I raised up the fish and everyone seemed to be just as excited as I was. Another thing about that fish is that it was my first mutton snapper since coming back from school, and it was really nice to have that ticked off. It came in at 8.22 pounds and it was a great fish to end the day on. It was the very next day and we decided to hit the water again. We started out this day at the same zone where I saw the big mutton snapper in last week's video. This drop was actually in the exact same place where I saw that fish. I also mentioned last video that this is an area that has been known to hold big king mackerel, so whenever I'm diving here, I know there's a good chance of me getting something. Before making this drop, I had cut up some chum and let it sink to the bottom. Before this drop, I had already made a couple dives in the chum just to see if there was anything around, and it was at the point when it had all settled on the reef already. I'm not too experienced using chum to bring up fish, but I'm pretty sure that once it's settled on the bottom, it's kind of lost its effect for bigger pelagic fish. However, this is still the spot where I saw that big mutton snapper, so I still gave it a chance and stuck on the bottom. While doing my grunting, I always like to be looking around because you never know if a fish is going to sneak up from behind you. As it was getting close to the end of my breath hold, I was still scanning around, and when I looked to my right, I saw this solid mutton snapper coming in. It swam right in front of me and gave me a perfect broadside shot. Because I knew that fish wasn't going anywhere, I really put on the brakes and didn't let it take any line. It was trying its best to get wrapped up in the reef, and it almost got me stuck underneath a sponge, but I was able to keep it off the bottom. Once I knew it was clear, I dropped some line so I was able to get to the surface easier. For any of y'all that have been watching my channel for a while, you would know that I've been struggling to get a mutton snapper. Last September I went overseas to do some schooling, and when I came back, one of my main goals was to get a nice mutton snapper. Before getting that first one in this video, I had multiple encounters with big ones on previous dive trips, but they would never give me a chance. I just felt like I was getting really unlucky with these big mutton snappers, and getting two back to back had me feeling like I was finally doing something right. When I shot this fish, I thought it was going to be in the double digits, but after weighing it, I found out that it was only 8. So it wasn't one of the monsters that I was hoping for, but I was still really happy with that fish. We dove around that same area for a while, but didn't get anything after that, so we packed up and moved to another spot. This next fish that you're going to see is one of my greatest achievements in spearfishing. This is a giant king mackerel that came in at 36 pounds. I put that fish down with a spine shot from above, but I didn't have enough time to turn on my camera before pulling the trigger. I made a drop on a big dog snapper that I saw, and when I was coming up to the surface, I turned off my camera. While swimming around, I saw a bunch of bait fish and barjacks, and this mackerel came in and smashed the barjacks. All of those fish rushed underneath me and used me as cover from that monster king, and it came back around and I was able to go down and put a shot behind its head. After I shot my fish, we all hopped on the boat to get a better look at this monster and to take out some videos.
Get them, Reggie. Show them what we just do.
36. I dive, mister there.
To me, the only unfortunate part of catching this fish was that I didn't get it on camera. Shooting a king mackerel has been on my bucket list for years, and I really wish I could have gotten that fish on video. However, I'm still really grateful that I got the opportunity to take down such a monster of a fish. After shooting my king, we all hopped back in the water to look for some more fish. With that giant in the boat as well as that big mutton snapper, the only thing I wanted to do was shoot some pot fish for the boat owner. I've said this before, but one of the most important parts of spearfishing is positioning yourself correctly. You have to put yourself in an area where fish will be passing, as well as lie down in a position where you will not be fully exposed. I positioned myself on a tall piece of reef towards the back of it, so anything swimming in front of me wouldn't have a good view at my whole body. As I was looking around, I saw this big stoplight parrot fish come from on top of the reef. I slowly turned my gun to track it, and I put in a perfect spine shot. With that perfect shot placement, I just went straight back up to the surface. This fish was around 3 or 4 pounds, which is a really nice size for stoplight parrot fish. I remember it being the last fish of the day because we had a lot of fish to sell, so we just packed up and ran home. When we got home, a lot of the guys thought it would be a good idea to take a few days off from diving and to go out the following week. I, however, wasn't done for the week, so I called up Jamil and we hit the water by my home the following day. We were diving really shallow that day, and while we were swimming around, I saw some really big mahogany snappers in about 10 feet of water. In my opinion, this hunt was almost perfectly executed and is definitely something that I think a lot of people could learn from. The first notable thing that I could point out is how I made my drop and how I positioned myself. I went down very slowly and put myself in a position where I was underneath that ledge and I was just peeking around the corner to look at those snappers. At first I was trying to keep myself as concealed as possible while grunting to try to get those bigger mahogany snappers to turn the corner to take a look at me. I just tried to stay as patient as possible while lying under the ledge, and I did some grunting and scratching to see if that noise would bring in the fish. Once I realized they weren't going to come around and give me a shot on their own, I slowly used my arms to pull myself towards the school. I did this as slowly as possible so they wouldn't spook, and once I had eyes on the fish that I wanted, I pulled myself closer and extended my arm for a shot. I nailed that fish right as it was turning away from me, and the spear ended up going at an angle from under the tail and out the other side. That shot angle made the spear pass between the flesh and the skin and made a really nasty looking wound. Even with the poor shot, that was still a really nice mahogany snapper and a really well executed dive. I shot that fish towards the end of our dive zone, so we turned back and started making drops while heading home. This section of reef where I'm making my drop here is one of my favorite mahogany snapper marks. They almost always swim over the patches of sand, so I make sure to land in a way where I can use the reef as cover. What I like to do is land away from the reef and crawl my way into position. In my opinion, I think it makes you look like less of a threat to the fish and they're more likely to come in once they see you make your drop. Once I'm happy with where I'm situated, I'll just stay still and do some grunting to try to attract anything in the area. With my hunting style, patience is key as I stay on the bottom even if I'm not seeing anything. The way I see it is that the more time you spend on the bottom, the more likely you are to run into a target fish. As I'm scanning around and looking over the sand, this nice barjack swims right above my head and presents a perfect shot. I stuck that fish exactly where I wanted to and headed back to the surface. Small barjacks like these make perfect fish sandwiches, so I always make sure to take them when I get the chance. After taking that barjack, we continued diving to go home, and before we made it to shore, I made one of the last drops of the day. This is a spot where I saw a couple huge rainbow parrotfish in one of my previous videos, so I was hoping for one of those to end the day. Before making my drop, I already had a landing spot in mind, and when I hit the bottom, I used this rock as cover. Whenever I pick out somewhere for me to land, the two things I look at is if it will cover me from any fish that are passing by, or if it has somewhere for me to hold on to. This one rock has a nice ledge under it, so I can just push my hand under and stay on the bottom while grunting. On this drop, I did something a little bit different than normal. After a while of not seeing anything, rather than staying on the bottom and waiting, I decided to crawl towards the edge of the reef. Even while doing this, I'll still use rocks and tall pieces of reef as cover while moving along the bottom. I also make sure to do this relatively slow because to a fish, speed means danger, and the slower you move, the more comfortable they will be with your presence. Once I'm at the edge, I'll look over into the deeper water while grunting to see if there's anything big in the area. Along with those big rainbow parrotfish, it's not uncommon to see some big mahogany snappers and Cero mackerels passing, and right as I turned around, I saw this Cero swimming right behind me. When I saw it, I lifted myself up off the reef and went to chase it down for a shot. Right away, I realized that I put in a really low shot, so I played it as lightly as possible so it didn't rip out. I played that fish really delicately for a while, and once I actually got a good look at my shot placement, I was less worried about it tearing out. With my shot being just above that bottom fin, it would be very difficult for the fish to rip itself free, so I just pulled it up to the surface and grabbed it by the tail. It was a nice little Cero to end the day on, and we headed home to wrap up an incredible week of diving. That about wraps up all the footage from that incredible week of diving. It wasn't really a week of numbers, but getting my first giant king mackerel and getting my first couple mutton snappers after coming back from school really made that week stand out for me. I'd also like to point out that this video was a bit slower paced than I would normally like it to be, but that's really just because this was kind of a filler episode between really nice dives. Last video, I managed to put down my first ever African pompano, which was an incredible achievement for me. And next video is going to be on an insane boat dive that I went on with a bunch of my great friends. I caught so many amazing fish that day, and it's definitely one that you're not going to want to miss out on. With that being said, if you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe because it lets me know if I'm doing something right. Also, if you have any feedback on this video or any suggestions for future videos, let me know in the comments, because all I want to do is put out the best content that I possibly can. As always, thanks for watching, and I hope to see you all next week. Later.